Good morning. When we were children, my mom used to take my sisters and I to the beach, to the Pacific Ocean. We didn't live very far away. And I remember we would play in the tide and build sand castles and look for seashells. And one of the seashells that was the most exciting to find were the sand dollars, because they were so rare, and especially the intact ones. And I remember thinking to myself how sad it was that God was running out of seashells, and that I was so lucky to find the sand dollars, because I could hardly find them anymore, which meant that God just wasn't making them anymore. So often this kind of thinking that we have as children follows us into adulthood, that God is done revealing God's self to us, that everything we have heard and everything that we know about God is all there is to know and to hear, to see and to ponder. For many years, the church considered that two ways of revelation. One, that you could only understand what God was saying if you were ordained, if you'd studied the scriptures, and therefore the laity sat passively during Mass to listen to the homily while the priest would interpret what the Gospels meant. The church also used to believe that the fullness of revelation, that God had done all that God was going to do in the person of Jesus. Now, it's true that God, in God's essence, was fully communicated by Christ. And yet we know that there is more, because the God we love is a dynamic, living God, not a static statue in a corner somewhere, and that once we've used our microscope to inspect this statue, that's all there is to know. God's revelation is ongoing, is as exciting now as it has ever been. And we can see that with the James Hubble telescope, for example. These stars that now we see for the first time have always been there, since God has placed them in the sky. And yet we have not known that they were there until we were given a new lens to view them. What more does God have to reveal? And why doesn't God do it all at once? When we're in a relationship with someone that we love, we don't usually reveal everything there is to know about ourselves right away. It's a slow dance, a process of unveiling, of pulling back the shell, the armor, the details that we don't want people to know on themselves right away. It's a slow revelation, and it's the same way for God. So God reveals a little bit of God's self to the people in time, to those in the Middle Ages, to the saints, to the doctors of the church. And they document and write down frantically, the evangelists. Let's document what we know about God. And then there is the experience of Joan of Arc and Teresa of Avila, hearing and seeing things that nobody else hears and sees about the divine. And it's suspect at first, like, can this be real? Because nobody has ever said it before. No one has ever told us that that's what God's like. And yet that's the exciting thing. Why would God exhaust everything to share about God's self with humanity at any one given time? Because God as well, evolving, changing God's strategy of how to communicate. So sometimes we read and hear things that we think don't jive with what we know about God. And this is why I've said before, you need to know what you know about God. You need to be sure who is God to you and what has God revealed, so that when you hear things, you can kind of match it up and say, there's an element of truth there, and I want to know more. Revelation is not over. And why couldn't God say things to you that God has never said to other people? That's the beauty and the wonder of the encounter of love.